Okay. Well, I thought you guys would want to see the farm since you can't be here. And not much has changed with the chickens. I think we have 13 of them. And they're laying well. This is a good time of year for them to lay, so they're doing it. And we did have quite a few rats, and they've dug up a lot of space, a lot of holes, and really big holes, some of them. But I got a pellet gun, and I've shot about 13 rats, and that really helped cut down on the rat population. Over here, you can just quick look at the compost situation. This is this bin was completely full of these ground up leaves that we collected from last fall and made leaf litter out of it. Leaf litter is what the forest makes. So kind of when you're composting, you're doing the work of a forest. And Carrie ground up, we collected all those leaves, and then Carrie ground them all up with the mower and made that leaf litter. And then we've been using it all this time. Leaf litter really helps to hold moisture and acts as a really good mulch around the plants. And it also works as excellent brown material for composting, so we use some of it in the compost. And this is compost that I just turned a couple days ago, and it is a hot compost pile, doing really well. The temperature's rising right now. Looks like it's at 115 or 110, and maybe climbing a little bit.
Jamie, would you explain about green and brown?
Sure. So the compost pile needs about 1/3 nitrogen and 2/3 carbon. And carbon is generally called brown material, and nitrogen is green material. But it's not actually green and brown, because what we mostly compost, or what makes up the bulk of our compost, is coffee grounds from Irwin's, and that is green material because it's higher in nitrogen than it is in carbon. But the dried leaf litter, that's good carbon material there. So the two things work together, and what I say is it's a way of putting bacteria to work for us in doing the work of a forest. It breaks down the material and turns it into this beautiful compost right here, which is extremely nutrient-rich dirt. And we've used, I don't know, probably 3 yards of this dirt, and we've probably used about 1.5 yards from us, and then we probably bought about 1.5 yards. Carrie wants to know why does the compost need to get hot? And it's helps to break down everything. That's one reason. And then another reason is that it kills bad things. Like it's supposed to kill pathogens and like weed seeds that are naturally there. It's supposed to kill them. But ours doesn't get that hot, so we can't compost everything. Like, for instance, we can't compost meat because it doesn't get hot enough. And then also we can't compost bindweed, which is the bane of our existence here, because bindweed is too tough and it won't kill it. So we've used up this. We've harvested the rainwater from the roof, and this thing was completely full. Both bins were completely full, and we've used all of that since January. And then we planted some kale and so forth around the bottom of it. And then Carrie had planted peas, and the peas are growing up. And then in the very center, we planted a calla lily because the leaves are so big and it doesn't really require very much sun, but I don't know if it's going to produce a lily or not, but it might just be a nice plant growing in there. So we've used all that water, and then unfortunately somebody drained out about, I don't know, maybe 100 gallons the other day. It was there and they just unleashed it and drained it out. I don't know who did it. It was like active vandalism. Here, I'm thinking of building another one of those towers. I have 2 more tanks, and you can see here that the water is already being drained from this roof, and it's being drained into this tank right here. But this tank fills up so fast that I could easily fill up 2 more barrels, and still that would be filled because that also gets water from another roof. So this is the tiny park, and it's been doing pretty well. For some reason, this bed has been thriving better than this bed over here, and I don't know why, but I'm going to tackle that eventually and figure out what's going on and how to improve it. Pat and Joan planted these little green things in between our rockery, and they're doing well. They've spread amazingly. You'll see some spots here where there aren't any, and that is because grass took over. So Joan came over and dug the grass out to give I think they're called teardrops, a little bit more effort, or a little bit more help in spreading out. So how does this park get used? Who uses it? Every single day, people come out here and sit on this bench and look at the chickens, and kids, lots of kids, every day lots of kids are out here, and they're feeding the chickens and talking to the chickens, and they just like to look at them, and they're very fascinated by the chickens. So this is a pollinator garden, and Linda Fetcher from Irwin's Bakery jumped on the idea of having a pollinator garden, so she bought the special pollinator plants. You can tell that a lot of them didn't make it, and I don't know why yet. But the idea is that we want to attract bees to our, well, we want to help the bees in every way we can, because without the bees, there is no pollination, and without the pollination, there is no fruit. So these plants are intended to attract the bees, but of course, most of them are dead, so they didn't. And then over here we have some tomato plants and some squash plants. My plan for these squash plants was to have them trellis up into the tree. I was going to make strings or ropes that go down and then wrap around the plants so the plants could grow up, but they haven't wanted to do that, so I haven't done it yet. But these are seeds that we got from last year's harvest. And here are 2 new raised beds that we got from somebody, Josiah, my son, and I'm going to make another one, or I intend to make another one right here. It won't look like that. Here we got a lot going on. We've got scarlet runners, which is a kind of bean that's growing here, and you can see the beautiful red flowers. And then on the other side of this, we have pumpkins and squash growing. And if you look right down in here, you can see we got a couple of pumpkins that are already forming, and we've gotten some squash already from it, yellow crookneck squash. You can take a look there and see the baby squashes growing. And then this flower here was really something earlier in the spring, and I don't know what to say about it. But then these are all a certain kind of tomato that I planted, and they are from last year's seed. They're called Silets tomatoes, and they're supposed to be slicers that were developed for this climate, and we'll see how they do. Last year they did okay. And
there's a little green one already.
yeah, we have some, there's a green ones coming up already. And then you see we have some corn planted here. Some of it's popcorn. Maybe this might all be popcorn. It's not doing very well right here. Some of the corn is growing better in other places. And I planted some beets along here. And these beets are doing about as well as any of our beets. I don't know why beets are having a hard time. There's some animal that eats the tops off of them, and completely eats the tops off of them. And then these are all volunteer potatoes, because last year we had potatoes here, so they just start growing up. So we have potatoes growing there. And then here we had a row of peppers, and they're not doing very well. That one's doing well, but that one's not. Check out this pumpkin. Here's another bed that I built this year out of logs that I milled. And this is supposed to be kind of like a bean and corn bed, which it is. We have scarlet runner beans and black beans. And then this is a row of popcorn. And then there's some volunteer tomatoes I see that popped up in there. So we'll see how those go. This was a huge pile of arborist chips that was dumped here for free for us. You can order them for free, and they come when they come, and they come in the amount that they come. You don't get to choose. It just comes when it comes, and that's how much you get. So this was a huge thing. It was about the size of maybe 2 vans put together. So this is an old wheelbarrow that we had, and it's not good for very much as a wheelbarrow because it's not very strong, but I thought it would make a good planter. So what we have here is an example of companion planting, where you plant a diversity of things in a small area. So we have lettuce planted here. We have a tomato plant, which I assumed would be the dominant plant because they get so big. And then this is, I'm assuming that this is borage, and it's supposed to go well with tomatoes. Then we have some a nasturtium here, and we have some mustard green growing here, and then here is parsley. I'm really grateful for how much stuff I can get for free. That's the goal, actually. And I got this big pile of mulch from a neighbor. They had too much and they wanted to get rid of it, so I was able to just drive over there with my truck, and I took 2 loads, and I got 2 loads of mulch here that we've been using around. This is called a cherry silverberry bush, and just like 3 weeks ago, it was covered in red berries that look like olives, except that they're bright red. And they have a big pit in them, like a big olive pit. And they cling to the pit like olives cling to the pit. And they're very sour, although they can get sweet if you get them at just the right time. But because they cling to the pit so hard, they're really hard to process for food. And they're not that tasty that you want to, eat them by themselves. You would want to make jam or something out of them. So I could see that I wasn't going to get a chance to process them this year. So I put a sign out here and some containers, and I said, feed these to the chickens, because the chickens love them. So the little kids got to come here and feed them, and they would pick them from the bush, and then they would take them over and feed them to the chickens. And then we have another bush, another silverberry, cherry silverberry bush over there, and it's the same. They did the same thing. They went and picked all the berries off of it and fed them to the chickens, and it was they loved it. This whole space is primarily a perennial food forest, which means that once it's planted, you just kind of leave it alone for the most part, and it does its own thing, and it self-perpetuates and grows its own food on a variety of levels. So, Micah Fetcher planted this some time ago, and the humps, well, they don't look like humps anymore, but where these clumps of trees are planted, these are each hugelkultur beds, which means that underneath them, he dug out a big pit and then put different kinds of wood and other scraps of things that would decompose slowly over a period of time and feed the plants that grow there, just like you would have happen in a forest over a long period of time. And so it helps to conserve water, and it helps to make the soil rich. And that was especially important because the soil on this property is terrible. And so Micah has made it so that it will now enrich itself, both from the top as the stuff falls down and decomposes this way, but also from the bottom as the wood chips and the leaves and the sticks and everything that he had buried, they decompose. So every once in a while there'll be a big huge bloom of fungus, especially some different kinds of mushrooms that show that the work is happening underground. And so here we have an Italian plum tree, and you can see the Italian plums. They're not ready, but they're green. And we're going to get quite a few of them this year, and then after this year we'll probably get even more. These trees are generally very prolific here in the Northwest, and the plums are usually quite delicious. I hope ours are. This is a red currant, and the currants are not ripe yet. They're red, but they're not ripe. No, that one was ripe. So they're super sour. They're tasty, but super sour. So, wow, really sour. So they would need to be put with a lot of sugar and probably be in something. But we have black currant bushes, and those currants are delicious by themselves. Sometimes I get some money that people give me as a gift, and for doing this or that thing, like say a funeral or something, they want to, it's like a tip or something. And so I usually take that money and put it toward something to do with the church. And this year what I did was I decided I was going to take some tree pruning lessons and have somebody come out here and teach me how to prune these fruit trees. So there's a woman in the neighborhood, Barb Burrell, and she goes around and does this. So I asked her to come and give me pruning lessons, and she did, but instead of taking the money, she said to donate the money. So we donated the money to Family Works, and we got tree pruning lessons from somebody in the neighborhood so that we can have fruit trees for the neighborhood. So that's a pretty exciting thing that happened this year. Here is a male kiwi plant, and there's no fruit on it. And I don't know if it's going to fruit, but it sure is pretty. And then here is a bush, and I didn't know what it was, but I'm wondering, it's a volunteer, we didn't plant it. I'm wondering if it's a rose bush. It hasn't got any thorns on it, but it sure looks like a rose bush, so I don't know what it is. It's exciting to see what that is. Here's a hydrangea bush that we got as a start from Candace Cucino. And there's also something, there's another plant that's here, but I don't know what it is. It's this, but it hasn't come to fruition yet. This is a mulberry tree, and these are the mulberries, great big long mulberries, and they're not quite ripe yet, but when they are, they're going to be delicious. A lot of these trees, like this tree here, is a pear tree, and according to Barb Burrill, its pears are really difficult trees to have, and so you can see the rust that's on this tree, and that's not good, but it's also extremely common, and it's a very bad year for it. So probably the tree will be okay, but we don't know that for sure. Anyway, there's not going to be any fruit on this tree for this year. Maybe next year there will be some fruit. We pruned the daylights out of it, and we prune it for the future. And that's one of the things about pruning the trees, and I think it takes a while to learn, is that you're pruning for the future, so you have to kind of learn what to expect. I don't know what to expect except for what Barb taught me. So over time I'll learn that. This is our elderberry, and you can see it just got a ton of green berries on it, and I'm looking forward to when it's ready to harvest. This is the black currant bush that I was talking about earlier, and last year this thing just produced so many black currants. This year hardly produced any, and I hardly got any off of it, and I don't know what that's about. Here we have a blueberry bush that's just been struggling and struggling. Blueberries are not that easy to grow, so I keep nurturing it. This right here is the bindweed I was mentioning. That is the bane of our existence. And you can pull it up, but it just grows again. It's just amazing stuff. And even if you had a quarter of an inch of it left, just like if you flung a quarter of an inch of it on the ground, it'll just grow right like that. So I have to keep pulling it up and try to get it as much up as possible, and try to attack the leaves as much as possible, just so I'm not going to defeat it, but I'm going to beat it back. And here's dino kale that has been growing. It's a couple years old. This is all mint. Then this year I just stuck some annuals in here. Here's a squash plant. I think that's a yellow crookneck squash. And here's a I think this is a pumpkin plant, and you can see the green pumpkin right there on it. Another squash plant with a squash growing on it. You can see interspersed, there's in various places there are these kale plants that are growing, all edible. Here's a female kiwi, and unlike the male kiwi, the female is really fragile, and so that's why this one isn't as big as the male. I learned from Rachel that over the winter, I need to nurture it by putting a lot of mulch around it and making it so it's toasty or warm. This right here is a Jerusalem artichoke. I don't know why it's called that. It doesn't have anything to do with artichokes as far as I can tell. It's much more like a sunflower, but it makes a potato-like root. And that's not it. That's a root, but it's starting to make one here. And we have a ton of them. And what they're good for is basically to grow and then cut down, or grow and pull up like I just did, and then toss it in and let it decompose. Chop and drop. Here we have that bindweed that I want to defeat. And I definitely don't want it to, it'll get a hold of my kiwi and damage it. So I want to keep our kiwi bindweed free. I have these buckets, 2 in the garden, and it's just to put the bindweed in, and then I'll put that bindweed in the commercial compost, because the commercial compost gets hot enough and that can kill it and make it into compost and soil. So here you can see that I'm trying to teach this tree to grow the direction that I want it to grow, and we'll probably trim it back. I don't want to have this long branch out here forever, but for this year it's okay. Got our apple tree here. It won't be fruiting this year. Next year it should be fruiting. Another silverberry bush that I was talking about.
There were so many bees over here just a minute ago. Oh.
Yeah, there are a lot of bees going right here. So the bees like this plant is a I can't think of the name of it right now. We got a lot of them. I can't say. Back here you'll see another red currant bush, and it's not as prolific as the other one, and you can see part of why is because the bindweed is attacking it, so I have to keep getting that out of there. And then this is another black currant bush, and again it wasn't prolific this year like it was last year. This is a goji berry bush, and it is just struggling. It's been planted here for a while and it just struggles, and you can see the bindweed's attacking it right here, so I keep protecting it. It looks like it would be a really tough plant because it's got thorns and everything, but it's still struggling. Here are some sweet peas, and Carrie planted these a long time ago, and then we didn't think they were going to come up at all, and then they did come up. But in the meantime, we had a trellis up here, and the trellis kind of fell apart, so now they're just laying there. Here's another kind of tomato garden. I haven't grown these kinds of tomatoes before. So I tried an experiment of putting down cardboard and then putting dirt on the cardboard and then planting on top of that. And I like how it worked in some respects and not in other respects. The respect I didn't like it is that I didn't puncture through the cardboard into the dirt to plant the tomato plants, and I wish that I had. And that's the same thing over here. I didn't puncture through. I just put the dirt down, and then I put the seeds in that dirt. And I don't think it worked as well. So if I had it to do over again, I would either put more dirt before planting or I would puncture through. Then you can see how this looks sick. And I think that it's a disease that happens, and I have some special mycelium that is supposed to combat that, and I got it and I haven't put it on yet, so we'll see if that happens. Here you can see these flower pods, and they're going to reseed themselves in true forest fashion, so maybe we'll have more of those. And here you have another squash growing up a trellis. Your little squash guys growing right there. Throughout the garden, we have a number of dahlias from Richard and Candace. They just gave us a ton of bulbs, and so we just planted them haphazardly around, and soon we'll have beautiful dahlias. I'll show you some later. This is a sage plant, and it's a culinary sage plant. More dahlias out there by the street, a whole row of them. And then more of our tomatoes from seeds that we grew last year. And you can see here how this vine I'm training this vine to grow out here. And we have the beginning of a little squash right there. And then here we have garlic. And this garlic has gone to seed. These are garlic seeds right here, and then the garlic is under there, probably about ready to harvest. This is a oregano bush for oregano for cooking. And over here, this is a whole garden of kale and chard, and we've gotten a lot off of it already, and now it's about done for the season. We let it go to seed. Like this is a big, gigantic chard plant. Oh man, it's just heavy with seeds, and we'll let it go to seed, and then we'll plant those seeds again. And that's what you can see here. This is either a kale or a collard green, and these pods have seeds in them, and we'll save those seeds. I'll tell you who else likes the seeds. Birds like them, and you can see here where they came and ate them. And if I left them out here, they would just eat them all. So what I do is I snip them off and put them in a paper bag and save them for next year. Oh yeah, go look at that dahlia. That's a pretty dahlia. Here's a bed of collard greens and kale. I see this is an interesting bed because one of the things that happened this summer or this early spring was that this whole road was filled with machines, and there was a gigantic building right here, a portable building that was kind of like office while they paved the road out here. So all of this space in here was unusable until they left, which they only left about a month ago. So all of these plants I just had kind of left over from our plant sale, and I just stuck them in the ground, and now they're just blossoming like, or not blossoming, but they're fruiting like crazy. And then I noticed that there's all these volunteers from, I don't know when, I guess last year. Here's the volunteer radish, and I've gotten several volunteer radishes, volunteer mustard. This is volunteer squash. This is a volunteer tree that we don't want. The squirrels plant these trees everywhere. We get a huge crop of daisies. These were all daisies, and they bloomed, and now they're done. And now this crop of daisies is up. You can see here we have more beans and corn that is just dead. It's just not doing very well at all. The zucchini squash I planted here is not doing very well. So I don't know why this space is just not doing very well down here. This looks really good growing here, and I don't know what the difference is. Look at this. This is that mold. I think it must be some kind of a slime mold that's happening. So these are some raised beds that our neighbor was going to get rid of and just gave to us. So we were able to take them, and I filled them up and planted them. And so I love how they look. Here we have more scarlet runners. We have corn that's doing well in them. We got some little baby zucchinis coming up there.
Hannah helped prepare those.
And these beds were prepared by me and Carrie and Hannah. Here is a bean that I got, I think, from Candace last year, and I don't know what kind of bean it is. We're gonna see. I see it's got some purple flowers coming on it. I like that. This is Deborah's grave back here, and it's adorned with a number of beautiful flowers that are just growing. Daisies, and then look at this beautiful dahlia, and then there's going to be a bunch more. I see little dahlia buds. And then Germaine wants to also have her ashes buried here, so we'll probably have her ashes buried right here, and then this little corner can just be adorned with flowers and plants, and help us to remember our sisters. So the scarlet runners over here are doing great. Oh man. Beautiful zucchini. The zucchinis are just become ready in overnight almost. So this group, this space here is all raspberries, and it was just one or two little plants, and they fruited earlier this year, and now they're done, so I'm going to prune them back. Here's one raspberry. One raspberry, and it's not even ripe. Look at these sweet peas here. Again, we thought they weren't gonna flower at all, and they just are busting out now. So this is hilarious. There was a gigantic, huge tuft of grass that was about 20 feet tall right here, and I cut it down earlier, and this is what it looked like after I cut it down and processed it. Well then, out of nowhere, all these tomatoes volunteered and came up. It's just like a whole huge thing of tomatoes, and I have no idea how they got here, because this grass has been here for many years, and then before that it was other stuff. I've never planted tomatoes here, but here's a whole patch of tomatoes that just volunteered. So Carrie planted this red flower in 2019 from our Easter service in 2019, and she planted that flower out here, and then there's another one back here that hasn't blossomed yet. There were two plants that she planted from our Easter service 2019. And this stuff here, we're just kind of overrun with this stuff. It smells like licorice. It's like anise or anise. I don't know if it's true anise or not, but it can be eaten in salads, and especially it's nice when it's fine like this, because it doesn't stay fine. See how it gets here much more robust. Ray told me that you can cut these and eat them like asparagus. I haven't done that yet. And then here it's starting to blossom, and then it'll go to seed, and we can get just tons of fennel seed from it. That's what it is, it's fennel. Here's another one of those volunteer trees that the squirrels planted. Ugh. So here are potato towers. And last year I did an experiment of potatoes in gunny sacks. And it was fine, I liked it, it worked. Then I heard about these potato towers, and so these potato towers, I don't know how they're going to turn out, but I'm expecting that we're going to have a ton of potatoes, because they're levels of potatoes. What you do is you put down a level of straw, and then you put about 2 inches of dirt on top of that and put your seed potatoes in there, and then put dirt, a little bit of dirt to cover them, and then more straw. So then you just have layers that go up, up, up. So then they grow out the side. That's why they look like they do. They're growing out the side of the thing. And here, this is an interesting experiment. This gigantic collard green plant was growing over in at the parsonage, and I wanted to move it, so I just dug it up and planted it over here, and it's just thriving as a seed producing plant. You can see here another squash plant that's growing out and around. I want it to grow that way, and so that it doesn't grow out here. And then we have this whole garden of I think this is cilantro. It's going to seed, unfortunately. And then beets, and then lettuce, which I just keep harvesting the lettuce. This is an eggplant, and I'm hopeful, it has blossoms, so I hope it'll produce an eggplant. Here we have beautiful basil. And then we have some pepper plants. I think they might not be getting enough sun. So here are more peas that Carrie planted. Now these are not sweet peas, these are field peas. And we've left them to go to seed. And we'll harvest the seeds from these and plant them again next year. And then when we do harvest them, behind there, Carrie planted nasturtiums. And so once these come down, the nasturtiums will be able to get more sunlight. The nasturtiums are planted in a piece of gutter that we had laying around. And I've been using gutter as a planter for like this lettuce started out in a gutter, and I put a little amount of dirt in there, and then I planted the lettuce seeds, and then the lettuce seeds sprouted, and they made little root system underneath. So then I just scraped the dirt out and planted it right there. Here is these are fava beans. I planted fava beans last year, and they were completely destroyed except for about one plant that I used and harvested the seeds from. Now, the same thing happened this year. I planted those seeds and they were destroyed. And you know who destroys them? The squirrels. The day after I plant them, the squirrels come out and they dig up every single one that I planted. I don't know how this one escaped, but this one did escape. So I'm gonna let these grow, and then I'm gonna harvest these seeds, and then I'll plant them next year too. And then when I plant them, I'll protect them from the squirrels, now that I know that the squirrels are so voracious for my fava beans. So this is a whole grove of fruit trees, and this is called espalier, which means basically that they're flat. And so what should happen is that this should just produce a lot of, this is a pear tree, it should produce a lot of pears in a very small space. And as you can see, it has rust on it, and it's being finicky. But this is a plum. This is a plum, and it's looking much healthier. And we pruned it, so it's not going to have fruit this year, but it'll have fruit next year. Same with this apple tree. This apple tree won't have fruit this year, but it will have fruit next year. Now this gigantic tree here is a apricot tree. And last year we just got, I don't know, we must have got 100 pounds of apricots off of it. But then it was growing so wild that I pruned it. And since I pruned it so severely, I made it so that it doesn't bear any fruit this year. next year it will bear fruit, and it'll be more the shape that we want it to be. More experiments in companion planting, in planters, the dominant tomatoes, but also back here we have lettuce, and this is a zucchini that is not doing great. Interspersed, you'll see these marigolds. Marigolds are great companion plants because they are pretty, but also because they detract bugs. So all this front space here, over here to in the keyhole garden, is just overrun with running grass and bindweed, and it's so bad that I couldn't really grow anything in it. So I'm trying to reset it. And the way I reset it is I mulched over it very thickly, and then we're just gonna plant perennials in here and make this into a perennial garden, a perennial forest. I'm not gonna try to plant annuals because I'm not gonna be able to defeat the bindweed. The best I'm gonna be able to do is beat it back, and then hopefully plant plants that will overcome the bindweed over time. Over time means like years. So some of the plants that we've planted, Carrie planted a number of dahlias here that we got from Candace and Richard, and then here are some raspberry plants that we got from Rachel Fetcher. She has a perennial garden in her yard. This keyhole garden I just thought was a hopeless case, so I mulched over it and decided to put plant pots on it so that it doesn't look quite so bad. And I've gotten a lot of kale from it. This is, can't think of the word. What do you call this right here? Fruit.
Fig?
Fig! This is a fig tree. And last year we got quite a few figs from it. And then I pruned the daylights out of it, so we're not going to get hardly any figs from it this year. It grows it just grows so fast that I just have to keep hacking it. I didn't even hack it enough. I should have hacked it more, and I will still after this season. This is all intended to be a perennial space. And here's another garden experiment in planting in a container. This was a very beautiful flowering orange plant, and over winter it kind of died down, and now it's growing back like this, and we're not quite sure what we're going to do with it, but we hope to make it live. An attempt to grow a hydrangea out of a stick, and as you can see, it's working. But it's been growing for a while, like 6 or 8 months. Here we have papyrus that O'Neill from the shelter found it apparently, and brought me this papyrus plant, and it's really cool. I'm going to plant it in the ground. I don't think it'll survive the winter. This isn't the appropriate climate for it, but it might survive the winter. Depends on how bad the winter is, and it also depends on whether I can nurture it with mulch around it and so forth. This is just a mess over here that we've got to figure out, and we don't have figured out. But here you can start to see how the aggressive the bindweed is. And it's not, I mean, I pull this almost every day. I'm pulling bindweed somewhere, so it's not like I'm just leaving this. I've pulled this within a week. This is less than a week growth. Up here, I have a rooftop garden, and I can either access it from a ladder that comes down here, or I can go in my house and crawl out the window, which is what I normally do. And I have several planter boxes, and then inside the kind of greenhouse looking thing here, I have a lot of pepper plants, and they're doing well. In 2019, I bought a $2 wandering Jew plant, that's this, and I bought it for the purpose of propagating it and then giving it away as a gift. When we have guests at church, we follow up the guests and give them a plant. So we did that, and then my cats attacked the wandering Jew and just destroyed it until there was just one little leaf left. And this is what has grown back from that one little leaf. This space here was full of baby plants, hundreds of them. And we had a baby plant sale, $2 per start. And we sold just a ton of starts. And it was a self-service thing, so just an honor system. And people loved it. And so I look forward to doing that again. This is where the nursery started out. So in the winter or early, starting in February, you can see these carts here. And I built these carts out of junk. As you can see, these are bicycle wheels that were off of junk bikes. And then we had a whole nursery operation here that started the baby plants starting, I don't know, we probably started working on it in late January. And really, it's feverish work from January. This year, it was feverish work from January until May. And finally, in May, it slowed down a little bit. But until then, the planting of the baby plants, the selling of the baby plants, the getting the gardens ready and so forth, just lots and lots of work that we did together. Mostly it was me and Carrie, and then Hannah and Joan also were instrumental in helping it to happen. The point of all this is to try to make an unusual place in the city of nature using, our permaculture principles. The three permaculture principles that are most important are care of nature, care of human beings, and returning the surplus, or sharing the surplus, meaning sharing it with the earth and sharing it with people. So I consider the making of food part of that. I consider the making of beauty part of it. And it takes a really long time to get it going, but then it just happens of its own too. So many wonderful things, so much abundance. I want to go to my backyard. So this gate is also junk. I made this out of junk. A lot of stuff is made out of junk, which I really like. I mean, that's part of the permaculture thing, is to reuse things. So this backyard is a mess in progress also. And this is a kind of fish pond that I have. We got this container for free, and I got water, and I bought a pump that recycles the water to try to keep it somewhat fresh. And I put like 40 fish in there. And as far as I can tell, only 2 or 3 have died, and they're growing. They're getting bigger. I got some free fish food online, and so I'm feeding them. And they seem happy enough, although I don't know how you know if a fish is happy. And you can see the water plants. I just got these water plants. This is lily pads and some other kind of lily back there. I just went and got them out of Green Lake and put them in here. So they've been growing in there for about a year. And then here's another bed of collard greens and greens that are going to seed. These huge ones that you see going to seed have been growing now for, this is more than a year that they've been growing here. And you can see down here, that white stuff that you're looking at, that's some kind of mycelium, some kind of fungal growth. Probably good. And then I want to show this. This is a failed experiment. This wheelbarrow I found in the woods in 1991, and the wheels are all messed up and barely turned, but I've kept it since then. And I decided to try to make it into a planter, and it just has not, I have not had success at it at all, partially due to sloth and partially just not knowing why. So thought I'd show that. So these hops are volunteers. I have no idea where they came from. They just started growing there. And one year they produced prolific hops. Last year they didn't produce quite as many. This year I'm imagining that they're going to produce a lot. And what we'll do is we'll probably have put an ad in the paper for people to come and harvest the hops. And then they can use them for beer or whatever. That's all.